And you're just not it. And in that environment, everything's very shallow, and very kind of like on the surface. And so, it's like, well, what led to the rise of Donald Trump as a political figure? And it's like, racism and Russia or whatever. And you're like, yeah, but that's not. Come on, man. Like, that's not really getting at what happened here. Like, why is it that this guy's anti-establishment message was so popular? It resonated so much with tens of millions of Americans. And I think you can, if you just look at just the 21st century alone, and you look at kind of like the elites that are in charge of society. Every society is going to have elites. That's just the way things work. You may not like that, but that's just the way things work. Every sector has elites, everything. That's how human beings are. But what have the elites like given the American people in the 21st century? It's like, okay, well, we got 9/11, we got two 20-year catastrophe wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. We got that all culminated in the worst financial crisis in 100 years in 2008. In response to that, so the Federal Reserve, another organization that should be abolished, but they do a good job of keeping data. So according to the Federal Reserve, it was like between 2007 and 2010, the average American lost 40% of their net worth. Like 40% of their net worth evaporated. And if you can just like imagine what it's like if you're like, you got two kids and you're making like 70 grand a year, something like that. Just kind of like the average person. You lose 40% of your net worth. You're like, it's terrifying. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then the response to that from Barack Obama when he got in was what they called the Obama recovery. But the Obama recovery was basically created by lowering interest rates to zero and jacking up government spending to the highest levels it had ever been. And so they have a recovery on paper. But who really benefits from an environment where you have crazy high government spending and 0% interest rates are, well, the 0% interest rates benefit the Wall Street speculators, because now everyone's got to speculate in order to make any money on their money. You can't just save your money because you're making nothing, so you have to kind of gamble it in the Wall Street casino. So Wall Street gets filthy rich off this. And then the high government spending, it's like everyone connected to D.C. made a ton of money. So it was great for them. But for the Rust Belt, it wasn't great. That's why so many of those same areas that voted for Obama went for Trump. So he was talking about bringing their jobs back and like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it's like, you put yourself in the perspective of these people who like, I don't know, like his son died in Iraq, you know what I mean? Or maybe one of his kids came back a mess from this war that they now admit we never should have fought to begin with. It was all bullshit. You know what I mean? You lost your job in '08 and now you have some crappier job than you've ever had before. You know what I mean? Maybe you got another kid who's like addicted to opioids or something like that, because there's a whole epidemic of that going on. And like then this guy came in and told you he cares about you. He's going to win for you. This big billionaire motherfucker said, I'm going to win. Bring your jobs back. It's like, it's not such a mystery why they went for that guy and why they rejected the entire corporate media who had been basically lying to them for the last 20 years.
Yeah.
And then like there was never just like, it was almost like Crystal was like asking Chris Matthews, do you have a moment? Can you think about this at all?
Yeah.
And he was just completely like shut off to even like entertaining what failures of the establishment might have led to this new populist moment that we live in today.
Well, they had like a big moment where she was talking about taxing the rich.
Yeah, I think she was wrong about all that stuff.
Yeah, she was talking about how, we, during the pandemic, certain acts were passed that essentially eliminated childhood famine, right?
Yeah, she was making some credit about she was making some point about the child tax credit or something like that. The problem with all that, and I think Crystal Ball and a lot of the left wingers are just out to lunch on this stuff, is that like, listen, during COVID, 2020 and 2021 were like the absolute worst years for regular Americans. It's not like the government did something that really made everything wonderful. It was terrible. And in the midst of that, what the government really did in its response was give crumbs to people while giving trillions to like big corporations and big banks. So objectively, that's what happened. The trillions and trillions of dollars that they spent that year, the vast majority of it went to big business. So this idea that like that, and of course, you know, she can talk about the spending and how like, okay, you can say the spending, well, it helped for the people who got the money. It's like, yes, and then they had to feel the inflation from all of that.
But the childhood